Thank you, Simon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure and honour to introduce our guest speaker this evening. You are all aware of his stature in the Jewish world and as a guiding force for Jewish continuity. So I'll say only a few words. Avraham Infeld has shaped every belief I hold about the true meaning of that most overused phrase, Jewish continuity. He focuses on Jewish peoplehood, on Am Yisrael as opposed to Medinat Yisrael or Eretz Yisrael. I think this is because he believes, as I do, that being an Am, a people or a nation, in the most profound sense of the word, is what gives meaning to the notions of Medina and Eretz for us. We have survived outside the land and without a state for thousands of years, only because we have remained a people. And so maintaining and strengthening our peoplehood has been Avraham's life work. He has founded or led all the major pluralistic Jewish educational institutions from which I have sought inspiration and guidance as a Jewish educator, a Jewish parent, and a servant of this Jewish community. Those include Melitz, the Shalom Hartman Institute, Hillel, and Taglit Birthright Israel. For this work, Avraham has been honoured by many prestigious institutions, including the Hebrew University and Hillel, the Foundation for Jewish Campus Life. Tonight, thanks to the Graf family and the Shalom Institute, we are privileged to have him share his wisdom with us. I am very happy to invite Avraham Infeld to the podium.
Shalom, good evening. Thank you to the Shalom Institute for inviting me. You have provided me with something of a dilemma. I do most of my public speaking in the United States of America. The reaction I usually get is wonderful, and then people say, we didn't understand a word of what you said because of my South African accent. You've provided me with an opportunity to talk to people who understand my accent. I hope that what I say makes some sense. I'm going to try to be brief because whenever I speak publicly, I'm reminded of the story of the public speaker who gave an address and went on and on and on and on. It just didn't stop. And after quite a while, someone in the audience got very upset, stood up and started to walk out. The speaker was distressed and said, "Excuse me, sir, where do you think you're going?" And the guy answered him and said, "I'm going to have a haircut." He said, "Now you're going to have a haircut?" And the man answered and said, "Sir, before you began to speak, I didn't need a haircut." I want to talk to you about a subject that is of much concern to me. It's a concern to me as a Jew deeply committed to Jewish future and deeply concerned about Jewish future. I had the distinct honor of being the international president of Hillel for 4 years, probably the greatest job in the Jewish world. Hillel is all over the world. More frequent flyer miles come with that job than any other job that I know. And I traveled the world meeting with young students. And wherever I went in the world, I used to carry with me a chart that was divided into 3 columns. Across the top of the first line, I'd written apples, oranges, bananas. On the second line, I wrote lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers. On the third line, I wrote jackets, shirts, pants. On the fourth line, I wrote Jew, blank, blank. I have 300,000 responses from Jews all over the world to what they filled in those blanks. What is to a Jew like an apple is to an orange. I have 208,000 responses from the United States and Canada. Over 204,000 automatically filled in the words Jew, Christian, Muslim, or Jew, Catholic, Protestant. We're just another kind of Christian, apparently. But 204,000, over 204,000, over 208,000 automatically, immediately responded by saying, Judaism is my religion. I have done the identical exercise with 38,000 Israeli soldiers and students. Not one responded Jew, Christian, Muslim. Almost all immediately wrote after the word Jew, Arab, and then went on to write American, Irish, maybe one wrote Australian. I've done the exercise with over 10,000 Russian Jews. There, without exception, every one of them after the word Jew, what do they write? Russian. They may be Russian citizens, they may be living in Russia, they may be speaking Russian, but they're Jewish. The non-Jew is a Russian. If you meet any young person who is intermarried in America, he'll say, I'm Jewish, my wife or my husband is Russian. Their significant other is a Russian. And in South America, and with a few Hasidim with whom I did this work, usually Belzer Hasidim, they're the only ones who allowed me in, I always got the response, I don't know. There's nothing like it. There's nothing that can be compared to a Jew the way that an orange can be compared to an apple. They're both fruit. We're, I don't know. They may be right. But my friends, what this pinpoints to us is that even with Jews who are Jewish enough to come to my exercises, to come to my lectures, there is a serious discrepancy in the way in which they understand their being Jewish. It is not a simple issue, my friends, because when Jews of one kind or another meet each other, they have great difficulty in understanding what the other's talking about. When you talk about things Jewish, Western Jews and Israeli Jews have everything in common other than their being Jewish. You talk to them about sports, they know the same sports, they know the same actors, they know the same films, they know the same music. But when it comes to talking about things Jewish, they are totally different. This concerns me about the future of whom we are. It's not a simple matter. It says to me that we Jews are no longer uniform. I don't have the time to go into the whole lecture of how we became no longer uniform. And people will say to me, Avraham, the Jews were never uniform. Jews were always uniform in one thing. Not in how to be Jewish, but we were always uniform in understanding what it meant to be a Jew. This breakdown in the understanding of what it meant to be a Jew occurred when the Jew of the ghetto met with modernity. And all of a sudden, he was invited to leave the ghetto, and that attempt to leave the ghetto created a Jewish people that are no longer uniform. And the real challenge of the Jewish people in my mind today is the question, is there any chance of unity without uniformity? I've been in education my entire life. I began as a madrich in a youth movement at the age of 15, and that was well over 50 years ago. And I've never left the world of Jewish education. And I've been struggling to try to find a way in which I can recognize the distinctions that exist among Jews and yet do something to try to enhance a sense of unity. It's for that reason that I developed what people refer to now as the five-legged table, in which I talk about the 5 basic legs of being Jewish. And that's what I want to discuss with you tonight. But before I go into what those 5 legs are, I want to tell you why I chose 5 legs and what's the exercise that I try to do in every educational environment that I possibly can. We Jews will never again be uniform. I know that I have Chabad rabbis in the audience. I love you all. We are not all going to be Chabadnikim. I know that I have some Verbrennte Zionists in this room. I'm with you on that. We're not all going to move to Israel. We Jews are not going to be uniform. And in the search for an opportunity to be unified, I turn to people in every educational exercise that I do, and I ask them, can I talk to you about 5 legs of being Jewish? And is there a way in which you can internalize in your lives at least 3 out of the 5? Now, one thing that's very important in this exercise is giving people the right to choose how they want to be Jewish. What combination of 3 out of the 5 they want to choose. And that's very well accepted. People want to choose. The problem is that most Jews that I know think that everybody should make their choice of what 3 is the most important. And why did I choose 3 out of 5? Because, sir, if I was to say to you, you choose 2, and sir, you choose 2, you could have nothing in common. But if every Jew in the world struggled to seriously internalize into their lives 3 out of these 5 legs, we would have a wonderful people that would not be uniform, but we would always have something in common. And my late father, who was a great Jewish educator and the head of the Zionist movement in South Africa for many, many years, always said to me, Avraham, if there's something you can do nothing about, celebrate it. I can run around the world crying that we are not uniform. Or I can say, isn't it great we're not uniform? We're like the colors of the rainbow. But what combination holds those colors of the rainbow together? And so, my friends, I'd like to talk to you about those 5 legs. The first convert to Judaism, a woman by the name of Ruth, who becomes the great-grandmother of King David, has a book named after her in the Bible. And the book tells the story of Naomi and her husband and 2 children who leave the land of Israel because of a famine. They go to the mountains of Moab. Tragedy happens and her husband dies. And Naomi is left alone to bring up her 2 sons alone. They grow up and they marry Moabite women. And Naomi can't take these tragedies, and she says to her daughters-in-law, goodbye, I'm leaving. And the one daughter-in-law says to her goodbye. Her name was Orpah, because she turned her back on her. This part of your neck is called your oref. Turned her back on her. And the other daughter-in-law, Ruth, used 4 words that are basic to being a Jew. And those 4 words were, Amech Ami Velohaich Elohai. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. My friends, the order is not accidental. If I want to become a Christian, I can say, your God is my God. I can become a Christian. If I want to be a Muslim, I can say, your God is my God. I can become a Muslim. As a Jew, you can never say, your God is my God, without first saying, your people are my people. The necessary condition for being a Jew is making the statement, your people are my people. And every time I give a talk anywhere in the world, the next day I read in the papers, Avraham's here again with his newfangled idea of Jewish peoplehood. What newfangled idea? It is the oldest idea in the Jewish people. Pharaoh called us a people. Ruth said, your people are my people. And throughout the Jewish world, we neglect to teach that sense of peoplehood. In New York City, there's a very famous bank. It's called the Chase Manhattan Bank. It has a great slogan. Every kid in New York knows, you have a friend at Chase Manhattan. It costs you a fortune, but you have a friend at Chase Manhattan. When a famous Israeli bank, I don't want to do any advertising for them, opened up their first branch in New York, they looked for a slogan and they wanted to attract Jewish customers. And they came out with this most amazing ad that you heard in the early 60s in New York, every 4 hours on local television, and every hour on local radio. You heard this amazing ad of this Israeli bank which said, you may have a friend at Chase Manhattan, but we're mishpocha. You may have a friend at Chase Manhattan. I did have glasses. You may have a friend at Chase Manhattan, but we're family. And they hit the nail on the head. If you want to know who the Jews are, we're a family. And that has to be taught. It's not accidental. It doesn't happen by chance. And you know how I know we're a... There we go. Thank you. Oh, I have notes. You know how I know that we're a family? We're always fighting. That's not only a joke, people. That happens to be true. Where do the best fights always take place? In the family. Because you care what a member of your family said. He said it, so what? You said it, ah. When do we teach that we're a family? What Israeli grows up with a sense of family for the entire Jewish people? Where does it appear in the education of the synagogue movements in North America? It's completely lost. Without that sense of family, the Jews have no future. I love to tell the story which I told earlier this week about my first flight from the United States of America back to Israel. I was in the United States on a visit. I had to go back suddenly. I came to Kennedy Airport. El Al had its own terminal at Kennedy Airport. It was a room about half the size of this room. It was called the Orange Terminal. I don't know why. It was painted green. It took me hours to find it. I eventually walk into this terminal, and in front of me are 3 identical booths. The first booth was customs control. The second booth was passport control. And the third booth was Chabad control. Looked just like the others. I had no problem with passport control. I had no problem with customs control. I come to the Chabad control, and this Chabadnik who's sitting over there says to me, excuse me, sir, did you put on tefillin this morning? In New York. You all know what tefillin are. It's like an antenna we put on to make a good connection. did you put on tefillin this morning? And I suddenly thought to myself, what would have happened if I would have said to this Chabadnik, thank you so much for asking me to put on tefillin. I would love to try it. I've never put on tefillin. It looks like a wonderful religious experience. My name is O'Reilly and I'm a Catholic priest. How would this Chabadnik respond? Don't touch, have a good trip, have a nice time, goodbye. But if I would have said to him, listen, I'm an Israeli and I'm a Jew, and I don't believe in this nonsense, and get off my back and leave me alone, he'd follow me all the way to Israel till I put on those tefillin. Now you know why? Because he knows that I'm obligated to put on tefillin only because I'm a member of the Jewish people. We do not send missionaries to Africa. We send Chabad to Sydney to work with members of the family. But that has to be taught. And it's a very unique family. It's a family with a unique chromosome. I've always called it the M chromosome. I have to tell you a story. I come from a long line of very famous physicists. I have an uncle who was among the creators of the first Sputnik. I have a cousin who was the head of physics at Yale. And the day that I was born, my late father knew that I am going to become the world's greatest physicist. Einstein, nothing compared to my father's dreams about me. So when I eventually went to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, I went to study physics. And my first day in the physics lab, I was looking out of the window, and I saw this beautiful young lady walking towards the history department. So I graduated in history instead of in physics. She's now the grandmother of my 15 grandchildren. But I've got to explain this to my father. He's waiting for me to put Einstein out of business. So I turned to my father, I write him a letter. I said, Abba, I've decided not to study physics, but to devote my life to the study of Jewish history at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I get back from my father at telex. We didn't have emails in those days. And I can hear my father screaming in the telex. He'd forgotten that I'm supposed to be a physicist. He wasn't mad at me. He was mad at the Hebrew University. He said, what? The Hebrew University teaches Jewish history? Are they crazy? There is no such thing as Jewish history. History is for the Goyim. Jews don't have history. Jews have memory. I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. Today I can tell you my father was 100% right. What's the difference between history and memory? History is knowing what happened in the past. Memory is asking yourself, who am I because of what happened in the past? And that is why, my friends, the verb that appears more than any other verb, in the Hebrew, in the Jewish culture, is the verb liskor, zecher, zikaron, yiskor, remember, remember. And we carry it to amazing extremes. A young couple fall in love, they decide to get married, they get under a chuppah. What do? They break a glass. Why? In order to remember the destruction of Jerusalem. My friends, I've been in this world for a long, long time. I've never met a couple who spent the first night of their marriage worrying about the destruction of Jerusalem. That's not what they do. But you cannot begin a new Jewish family. You cannot begin a new Jewish anything without calling on memory. And for those here who are supportive of Jewish education, I'd like to share with you that the purpose of Jewish education is how do you take the single individual Jew and open their mind so that they can connect their personal memory to the collective memory of the Jewish people. I was the first director of Birthright. What an honor it is to have had that position. 290,000 young Jews have come on Taglit Birthright to Israel. But what motivated it was the opportunity to take young people, most of whom had no connection with things Jewish, and enable them to link their personal memory to the collective memory of the Jewish people. Leg number one was family. Leg number two is memory. I'd like to talk to you about leg number three. Not easy in the secular world we live in. Very difficult in the secular world. If memory is important to this family, we have to remember that our earliest memory is not that the Jews left Egypt and landed up in Ramat Gan. That's not what happened. They stopped somewhere on the way. They stopped at Mount Sinai. And something happened at Mount Sinai. And I really don't care how you interpret Mount Sinai as a Reformed Jew, as a conservative Jew, as an Orthodox Jew, as a secular Jew, but you cannot ignore Mount Sinai, because it was at Mount Sinai that this family printed its visiting card, created its invitation to the world, its introduction to the world. These are the values that I abide by. I know that there are those who say we got 613 commandments at Mount Sinai. I want to talk to you about 3 commitments that our family made at Mount Sinai. Number 1, Atem Edai. God says to the Jewish people, you are my witness. You're to bear witness to the fact that there is a God in this world. And every major belief in a single God, in monotheism, derived from us, because we fulfilled that mission to a degree. But I'm very proud that we took upon ourselves to be witnesses to the fact that there is a God in this world. You know why? What is it that you're saying to someone when you say to them, there is a God? You know what you're saying? The job's taken. There's no tender out for the job. You can't be God. You are only human. You can fail. You can correct yourself. But you can't control everything. And you cannot rule. You're not God. Why am I proud? Because there's nothing more dangerous in this world than a human being who thinks he's God. I don't care whether it's Haman, Hitler, Hussein, or any other H. You're not God. And the second commitment we made was to make this a better world. Do you have any idea how excited I got a few days ago at the Shalom Institute when I met with this program that the Shalom Institute is doing with indigenous people in this country, with that medical program? It blew me away. It's fantastic. I am deeply committed to the world of Tikkun Olam. We have a responsibility to make this a better world, and not only a better world for Jews, but a better world. 10 days' time, I and Dr. Hilton Immerman will be together at a conference which I'm running in New York at the General Assembly of the Council of Jewish Federations on how can we bring the state of Israel and the Jewish people to work together on behalf of those impoverished in the world. 2 billion people go to sleep at night hungry. It can't be ignored. We can't solve all the problems on our own, but nor are we allowed to absent ourselves from trying to. And thirdly, we committed in Mount Sinai to do all kinds of things that will remind us whom we are. That is why almost every ritual, whether it's tzitzit or tefillin or kiddush on Friday night, all talk about zecher, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, zecher lebriat olam, to remind us whom we are. So leg number 1, family. Leg number 2, memory. Leg number 3, Mount Sinai. Leg number 4, the land and the state of Israel. I had an amazing experience in Australia this week. I arrived here on Thursday. I met with a lot of people on Friday. And what were they doing? Everyone that I met with was complaining about the weather. It was raining like hell. And then I went to shul Shabbat morning, and what did we do? We prayed for rain. We just began last week. You're praying for rain and you're complaining. And you're right. I grew up in South Africa. I had the same problem. This time of the year, all of my friends started to pray for rain. I never prayed. My father was an atheist. He was a Jewish atheist. He always used to say, I'm an atheist, Baruch Hashem. But I used to get very nervous. I wanted to go out and play sports. I didn't want rain. And all my friends were praying for rain. And I go to my Abba and I said, Abba, why are they praying for rain now? And my father looks at me and he says, Avraham, our rain doesn't fall in South Africa or Australia. Our rain falls in the land of Israel. Try to grow up normal with an answer like that. No way. But being Jewish is not being normal. It's being different. It's living with a memory of the entire Jewish people to whom rain in the land of Israel is important. Because the land of Israel, every single inch of the entire land of Israel, and this is not a political statement, every single inch of the entire land of Israel is the warehouse of Jewish memory. When I walk the streets of Jerusalem and I kick up the dust, with it I kick up the memory of King David, of my past, of our people. That land is filled with the memory of our people. That's why we did not decide to send birthright to Hawaii. And the state of Israel, my friends, in my own lifetime, I don't know how many of you in the audience are Israelis, but if there's anybody in this room who has reason not to like Israel, it's me. I pay the highest taxes in the world. I have the worst drivers in the world. I'm not very happy with the government I live with. I could earn the same salary I'm earning in Israel. I could earn the same salary in South Africa, excepting in South Africa it would take a week. It takes a year in Israel. So what am I doing there? And very often Israel acts in ways which do not make me happy. There are times when I do not like Israel. But I never, ever stop loving Israel. For one primary reason. In my own lifetime, and you people in Sydney know what I'm talking about, the noun that went along with the adjective Jewish more than any other noun was the noun refugee. Jewish refugee. Jewish refugee. Today there is no such animal as a Jewish refugee for one reason only: the existence of the state of Israel. And that is why Israel cannot be important only to the Israeli, but must be important to the entire Jewish people, because it turned your family from a family of refugees into a family that will never, ever again have a refugee. Leg number one was family. Leg number two was memory. Leg number three, Mount Sinai. Leg number four, the land and the state of Israel. And leg number five, my friends, is the Hebrew language. I don't know how many of you have ever been to a place called Omaha, Nebraska. I got invited to go and give a lecture in Omaha, Nebraska. I never knew that there was a state called Nebraska. And I never knew that there was a city named after my grandmother, Omaha. That's what we used to call her. I arrive on a Sunday morning in Omaha, Nebraska. They said, Avraham, your lecture's only this late this afternoon. Would you like to visit our Sunday school? I said, I'd love to visit your Sunday school. So I come to the Sunday school. I walk into this classroom. I see a young teacher surrounded by a group of 18 or 20, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. And what is she doing? She's trying to teach them how to read a language they don't understand. Do you know what I'm talking about? I've never heard of anything more ridiculous in my life. No other people in the world do that. The normal way of learning a language is you learn to speak and then you learn to read. Not us Jews. We learn to read before we understand a word. And we spend over $250 million a year, all told, around the world in doing that. I looked at these children's faces. I saw the suffering of my people. I said to the teacher, why are you doing this to them? What did they do to you? She said, Avraham, you don't understand. I only have a year or a year and a half until their bar mitzvah. And they have to learn to pray in Hebrew on their bar mitzvah. So I called over one of the kids. I'll never forget him because of his beautiful Hebrew name, Timothy. I said, Timothy, why do you have to pray in Hebrew? You know what he said to me? Because God doesn't understand English. By the way, that may be the message we are giving our kids. We have a stupid God. He doesn't understand English. I can tell you people here in Sydney that God understands Hungarian. So why do we pray in Hebrew? Because all peoples do important things in the language of their culture, because language conveys concepts that are central to a people's culture. That's how we should be teaching Hebrew, as a culture and value laden language. I want to give you 3 quick examples and then I'll end. Have any of you ever heard of the phrase in Hebrew, to fall in love? I hope you have. Can somebody explain to me what's the connection between love and falling? It used to be my favorite hobby. I never felt that I felt into it. You rise in love, you don't fall in love. And you don't have that phrase, to fall in love, in any Buddhist language, in any Muslim language, in any Jewish language. You only have it in Christian languages because it comes from the cardinal sin of man in Christian theology. The first failing. He who abstains is the Holy One. Jews don't abstain. The more the merrier after marriage. In Hebrew we say to fall in love. Lehit ahev. It's a unique grammatical form called hitpael. Any verb that is in hitpael is always reflective, always interdependent, always mutual, both active and passive. To write is lichtov, lehitkatev is to correspond, to love is lehov, to fall in love is lehitahev. It's a different way of doing something important. Have any of you ever heard of the Hebrew word kadima? Kadima means forward. You know how you say before in Hebrew? Kodem. Listen, people. Kadima, kodem. It's the same root. You know why? Because central to our culture, there is no future without a tie to the past. There can be no kadima with what came kodem. And that ties also to a land known as Eretz Kedem, the land of Israel, with the same root. How do you say charity in Hebrew? No, tzedakah is not charity. We are not a charitable people. Charity is when you see somebody hurt themselves and you feel bad and you give them something to help them. Jews give even when they don't see. Jews give because it's the right thing to do, because it's the just thing to do, because the word tzedakah comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, justice. I used to have a beggar that I visited every Friday in Jerusalem. He always used to have 2 cups in front of him. I used to put $1 in the one cup, and he used to take 10 cents out and put into the other cup. And I said to him, "What's that for?" He says, "You think I don't have to give tzedakah?" And he's quite right. Even the poor has to give tzedakah. My friends, I'd love all Jews to find a way of incorporating in their lives all 5 legs. It ain't gonna happen. It's imperative, however, my friends, that we find ways of reaching every Jew through all kinds of means and helping them make a choice. And by the way, when young people are presented with a choice, they relate seriously to their choice. Let them choose at least 3. At least 3 they can internalize in their lives. And if we do so, we will become a people that is something that I have always dreamt about. How can we continue to be distinctively Jewish and universally human at the same time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Avraham, for your incredibly inspiring oration. Your words took me back to the girl I was at 14 when my parents took us to Israel to meet my father's family for the first time. And I met my father's family, but I found my family, my people. So please join me over here for some questions and answers. I have 5 questions, but following your lead, I'll ask 3. And then we'll possibly take some from the floor.
I asked someone to signal me when I have 5 minutes left. I think they did so about 20 minutes ago, but I couldn't see you. Yeah.
I've got a mic. You said tonight again that we Jews have memory, not history. How does this help us engage with those who deny and distort our history, particularly in relation to Israel, in order to delegitimize and destroy us as a nation?
I thank you for the question. I think the biggest crime that our enemies are perpetrating against us is their attempt to erase our memory. We allow it to happen, by the way, because we forget about teaching our memory. I don't hear either the Jewish world, but by the way, I don't hear the Christian world and the Muslim world who draw on that same memory for their own memories. I don't hear them complaining about the attempts to destroy our memory. The chutzpah. We were never in Jerusalem. And while saying that, they're removing from the Temple Mount every remnant of our memory. My children spend days and days going through these sand piles of sand that the Arabs have removed from within the Temple Mount in order to retrieve the coins and the other artifacts which prove our presence. They would not have a chance of succeeding if we had inculcated the memory deeply into ourselves and into our people. We would be out there yelling about it because they are not attacking Israel, my friends. They are destroying your memory. It's the world's responsibility, and primarily world Jewry's responsibility, to draw the attention of the world to this uncannily chutzpahdik method of waging warfare. It's not just words. So yes, I think it's our memory. We have to know it's our memory, and we have to remind the world that we live with that memory.
You've said that faith and belief in God are not essential to being Jewish. So if not faith or practice, what do you believe is essential to maintaining Jewish identity? And how important do you think a tribal Jewish identity is anyway?
Oh, I hoped she wasn't going to ask that question. I never said that God is not necessary. I did say that the necessary condition for being a Jew, a necessary condition for being a Jew, is that sense of peoplehood, that sense of belonging to this people. Because with that, everything begins. But there is a distinction between something that is a necessary condition and something that is a sufficient condition. The necessary condition of being a Jew is knowing that I'm a member of this people. But what I spoke about was you have to add at least 2 of the remaining 4 in order to achieve a sufficient condition. God is not only in that area of religion. God appears in my memory. God appears in my relationship to the land. I'll tell you a secret. God's there whether he exists or not. I know exactly what my father was doing when he said, I'm an atheist, Baruch Hashem. God is not necessarily a theological issue. He's an actor on the stage of Jewish memory. Very quickly, I remember telling this to my own kids when they asked me about God. And how come when Saba walks into the house on Shabbos, my father, all of a sudden the lights go on? It must be a miracle. God turned on the lights for Grandpa. And I had to explain to them this idea, and I said to him, you know, I have a friend who's 500 years old. I love him deeply. He's been my friend for 500 years. But for the last 300 years ago, he married this bitch. I can't stand her. I don't have anything to do with her. But you know what? For the last 300 years, he has defined himself in relationship to this woman. I can't have a relationship with him and ignore this woman, whether I want to or not. So I'll try to visit him when she's not home. I'll try to meet him at places that she doesn't go to. But I still cannot ignore the fact that she exists. I have the same problem with this thing called the Jewish people. I love the Jewish people. And they've been having an affair with God for 4,000 years. And whether I like it or not, my relationship to this people cannot ignore God, but it's not a question of religion. A very famous philosopher of religions once said, religion is that which a man does in his moments of aloneness. If that's true, that's definitely not Judaism. Judaism you don't do in your moments of aloneness. We just celebrated Yom Kippur. We beat our chest as we read out a long list of sins. I'm still full of pain because I'm a passionate prayer. I can't touch myself. But I want you to know that at least half those sins I've never done. I don't know why. Maybe I just never had the opportunity. But why am I beating my chest? Not al-ched shechatati, but al-ched shechatanu. I'm beating my chest for all of your sins. I hope you enjoyed them.
You're an ambassador for Limud International. As members of tonight's audience will know, Limud is an exceptional in-house cultural and educational event which values diversity of opinion, and as such often allows Jews who are very critical of Israel to present. How do you feel about this? And if there are any red lines, where should they be drawn?
I thought I was going to avoid politics, but in an official capacity, I would say the following. That I would be hesitant and careful. I'm not saying don't involve them, but I'd be hesitant and careful in dealing with people who deny the right of a Jewish state to exist. By the way, denying the right of the Jews to have a state is not anti-Zionism, it's anti-Semitism. If every other people can have a state and we can't, That's an anti-Semitic statement. But beyond that, I would welcome them into Limud. I would much rather have criticism than disinterest. I would much rather have criticism within the family than criticism outside. And I want to relate a story very quickly. My daughter, when she finished the army, she fulfilled that very important mitzvah of either going to South America or the Far East, which is a Jewish commandment. And she decided to go to South America. She came while I was the president of Hillel, based in Washington, D.C. She came to Washington, spent a week with me. I drove her to the airport. And at the airport, she gave me a hug and a kiss. She said to me, "Abba, I love you, goodbye." And she started to walk towards the check-in. Suddenly, she dropped her bags. She ran back. She gave me another hug and a kiss. And she said, "Abba, I also like you." That was a very important moment for me. Not because my daughter also likes me, but I really understood the difference between loving and liking. She said she loves me automatically. Of course she loves me. I'm her only father. Love comes out of the relationship. Liking depends on how I behave. But we Jews spend so much time trying to get our kids to like Israel, we forget about them loving Israel. And loving Israel comes from understanding their relationship to the Jewish people and the Jewish people's relationship to the land of Israel. Concentrate more on the love. I really feel not too bad when somebody's embarrassed by something that Israel does. When someone's embarrassed by Israel, they're making a statement, it's important to me. I wish they wouldn't have done that. What's much more dangerous is disinterest and apathy. And that's the real enemy we have to fight.
Right, I think we might have time for 2 questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself if you're chosen. Gentleman at the back.
Yeah, thank you, Avraham. My name is Eran Weiner. I'm Israeli. My question is that we're talking about Jewish identity and memories, families, etc. But there is one outside pressure which you have not mentioned, and that is the pressure of those who do not want us, do not like us. He talked about do not want us or do not like us. We talked about Haman, we talked about Hitler, people like that. They grouped us into one big parcel, one big box. And they gave us all one-way ticket to Auschwitz or wherever it was, and that was that. Now, after that, we started to have all this division in the community. We started to have all this sort of thing, all these thoughts and wishes and, I'll say, democratic thoughts about how Israel should behave as a country. Everybody has an opinion, but not so much as people who live in Israel and handle it. So my question to you is that, how do you see the outside influence of the outside people on shaping the Jewish feeling within the diaspora?
I'm not sure you'll be happy with my answer. I know young Jews. I think I know young Jews all around the world better than anybody else that I know, having been in the position that I was. And if you think we're going to be able to continue to tell people that they should be Jewish because the Goyim hate us, there's no chance of that happening. They are looking for positive values in order to be Jewish and not to be judged by the way in which the non-Jew hates us. and we make every decision on the basis of the fact that we are hated, we are making a terrible mistake. I am not denying the horrors of the Holocaust. Nothing proved more how base a human being can become. But I want you to know that there are places in which Jews live around the world, in which Jews are not hated. I traveled recently on an airline from London to the United States called Virgin Atlantic, the second best airline in the world after Qantas. Sitting next to a very nice, very young woman, she was around 50, young in my eyes. They brought me my kosher food. She said to me, "Oh, you're Jewish." I said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." She says, "That's wonderful. I want you to know I have 4 daughters, and all of them married Jewish." And I said, "That's wonderful. You must be a very proud Jewish mother." She said, "I'm not Jewish, I'm an Italian. But we taught our children to marry Jews. They don't drink. They don't beat us. They treat their wives well. We taught our kids to marry Jews." Part of the problem in which we're living today is that we do not know how to live in a world in which non-Jews do not hate us. We've had a lot of experience of living in a world where non-Jews hate us. We're still struggling to find a way of living in a world in which not everybody hates us. But not everybody loves us too. And we have to be able to distinguish between those who do and those who don't. And we have to do what we can to win over those who do, to join us in our battle against those who don't. Painting a totally black picture that we are hated in this world is not going to ensure the future of the Jewish people.
Is there a final question, or is that an excellent place to end?
Thank you very much.
No, there is a final question. It's a Jewish audience.
Thank you, Lewis Levy. You mentioned earlier that you've been involved in Birthright, and I'd like to know who thought of Birthright, and how successful is it, in America about intermarriage, and I'd just like to get a little bit more information on Birthright.
I may tell you something that will probably surprise all of you. The idea of Birthright was the idea of a gentleman by the name of Yossi Beilin, member of the Knesset from the Meretz party. It was his idea. He dreamt about it, he wrote about it, he spoke about it, and he did nothing about it. At a party one night, Mr. Michael Steinhardt asked me, "Do you know the new, exciting, big idea?" I introduced Michael Steinhardt to Yossi Beilin. Michael then brought Charles Bronfman along. They brought the late Mr. Schusterman, Charlie Schusterman, along. And that's how it began, and that's how it worked. I was hired by them as its first director. And we had a dream. It was not only a dream of bringing kids to Israel, but the dream was, how do you create a world in which every Jewish child who is born with a ticket to Israel tied to their umbilical cord? It would be painful for the mothers, difficult for the doctors, but it would raise questions about, what is this tied to my umbilical cord? Why me? And why to that country? And this would raise all the questions of Jewish identity. the research has been done so far shows an unbelievable change of people who participate in birthright in the trends of intermarriage and continuing adult Jewish education. I want you to know I don't trust the results of those surveys. But if they are only 50% right, we've done an amazing job. Because the results are really showing phenomenal results that I think are over-exaggerated. But positive results are definitely there, and I think it's probably one of the most exciting things that exist within the Jewish world today. The real problem is, what do we put in place to follow up that experience? Kids come back, they've spent 10 days in Israel, they've had a great experience. Every kid, they can go on the best program or the worst program. They come back with a sense of, wow. And real success depends on who's waiting for them when they come back, and how do you follow up with them. Some of the work being done by your Shalom Institute and by Hillels around the world are aimed specifically at that. I thank you all for having me here with you tonight. Thank you.